Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Matthew Connell. I'm Curator. I'm Senior Curator here. I've been Curator of Computing and Mathematics at the museum, now called Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences again. We were the powerhouse for a number of years, but we've just changing to our actually full title. I've been here since 1991, and the museum has been, collecting and displaying artefacts and putting on other displays concerning technology in various other material forms since for 130 years. We've been doing that. We have a large collection. 3% is on display at any time, but the basic premise is that the things that we make and shape embody the values and beliefs of those people who produced and used those, and embody the values and beliefs of the culture that produced them. And those values can be read from these artefacts, which is why we put them on display in the museum. And that, I guess you would say that they therefore give you access at some level to what it means to be a human being. And I would suggest that every museum at some level is attempting to say something along those lines. And each museum has its own particular take on that question or on that answer. And this museum would say we are at our most human when we're making things, when we're taking material from our environment and shaping it into other things. And we've been involved with robots at some form or other, or with artificial intelligence now for some years. And this, in recent years, we've had more artists come and work at the museum because we found their approach to these discussions to be as engaging and as interesting and as interactive as we would like to be in our current culture. For many years, of course, the museum's been very didactic, where we've been the authorities and we put things on display and we tell you all about them. And so some of the things I'll show you are sort of along those lines. So in 1954, the museum acquired this noughts and crosses machine. It uses relays and valves. There appears to be some solid state devices in there as well, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. So this was made by a guy called Donald Davies, who was worked with Alan Turing on the pilot ACE at the National Physics Laboratory in England from late 1940s. He produced this machine out of spare parts in the lab, and because it was a spectacle, he was able to sell it. And our director bought one really quickly. And I have to say, it was a killer in this museum. It was extremely popular. That's the only photo that I could find of it in operation, and you'll note the title at the top. It was the electronic brain. And it was one of the great wonders, because this device would beat most people at a game of noughts and crosses. Okay? And it operated from the 1950s and was still in operation, although with issues, through to the 1980, I understand. Okay? And it continued to draw people, and we know that it's been very influential. Very recently, we got a call from Dick Smith, who wanted to go to the store, which is where it's now held, not operational, to go and revisit it, because he maintains that this machine was his inspiration for deciding to get involved with electronics. And so it was a marvel, this idea that a machine could do something that we, for many years thought was just too complex for a machine to undertake, and do it in a game with a human being. It was so successful and so popular that we continued to build more. These are two more versions that came afterwards. This one's a solid state one. This one's actually might even have a microprocessor in it. I I'm not sure when they were on. I saw both of them, but at various times we had more than one machine operating in the museum. And when I got to the museum, I took over an exhibition in which this device was there, and that was the 1988 launch of the Powerhouse Museum. They put in this three-dimensional noughts and crosses machine. It was the first one that was actually controlled, through a computer, and it also had a robotic element. So it had little sort of actuators that picked up those balls and moved them into position on the array of perspex things there. And it was quite a spectacle. It was quite complicated. Some people, it broke one of the rules we had with interactives, that people would get engaged with it and stay at it, and they wouldn't leave, right? And we, in order to keep flow through the museum, having something that's too engaging is a bit of a problem. But people would hang in with this one. So I've spoken to many people over the years about the array of noughts and crosses machines. And I've had a number of people come to me who've come back to the museum. A lot of people say, particularly adults say, I used to come when I was a boy or a girl to the Technological Museum up at Harris Street there, and I used to play the noughts and crosses machine. And very frequently I get, and it used to cheat. And so I've been asking around and asking people who worked here before I got here and say, did the machines cheat? Because there's something happens. It's not just an observation. When they tell me it cheats, there's an old resentment that comes through. Right? There's another level of, it's like people understand today that computers can manipulate, through code and through logic, can do a whole lot of operations that we can do logically. Right? But when they talk about the cheating, there's something else happening. They're assigning some other capacity to these machines, malicious intent, I would suggest. And so I've gone back to have a look and see, because I can tell you that this one, I spoke to the guy who designed it. In fact, I operated on this. I used this a number of occasions, and periodically it stopped the game when you were about to win. It cheated deliberately. It would just say, you've run out of moves, and we're closing the game. And we had official complaints about it. And I've been back to find out about the other machines. I think the other microprocessor controlled one cheated deliberately, but the two early ones I don't think were programmed to cheat. But I did find a letter from Donald Davis to our director, explaining that the problems that they might be having with the very original machine, that one, might be due to the fact that some of the components needed to be upgraded. So apparently this one, you would go to place a nought and it would place a cross, which would then fill a line, and that would be a win for the machine. And I think that the original machines were malfunctioning, to use Zelark's term there. But by the time we came to build our own in the 1980s, we knew the value of people ascribing malicious intent to the machine. That it added to a significant extent, the way in which people believed that it was intelligent, right? And so when we went on to further machines, this is for old Isaac's, sort of on life support, still downstairs on level 1, but he came in 1999. He was a standard industrial robot, and we basically used animatronic programming techniques to get him to dance and to play a few games and to do a few things, and he was spectacularly successful. Less so now because his grippers, we can't get new grippers for it, and they're not reliable. So when he does this sort of headbanger dance with a mop head too many times he flung the mop head at the glass and scared everybody. So he just goes through the motions, and it's a sad in a way. But Isaac's brief was to basically to mock people, to make fun of people, to operate with attitude, right? And that's what he does. And in one particular instance here, he plays a game where you have to hit buttons, and you challenge the human being to hit the buttons at the same time, and Isaac starts off slow, pretending to look at which button he's going to press, when in fact he has no eyes, and then we've just got to go as fast as we can. Kids, learn fairly quickly that if you use a few fingers at once and you just press at random, you can get a higher score than the robot. Nevertheless, Isaac never loses. So he always says, "You lose," and on a sign. He laughs at you and then says, "You lose." Right? And most people are sort of delighted with the idea that they're being mocked by this machine, which is obviously a machine. Every couple of years until recently, when it's not really been operating in the right way, I've had to field maybe 3 or 4 letters from people writing in to complain that the robot cheated. And they're not complaining that I've programmed the robot to cheat. They think that the malicious intent or the lying, that sort of behaviour is inherent in the robot, and that I need to not reprogram, I need to chastise it in some way. And I have to write back and say, Isaac, the only way that people can beat Isaac on that game is by cheating themselves. And Isaac doesn't recognise cheating children. I'm sorry, and I actually have people say that, as I said, Isaac undermines their self-esteem. This has been a consistent thing, that it's wrong to upset a child. Basically, the children get upset because they believe they've won. But it's that sort of, Stark talked about making a distinction between misbehaviour and malfunction, and with the concern that people will be anthropomorphising these machines. But of course, to a certain extent, that's robots are to be anthropomorphised. That's what they are. And within this museum, as objects, where we see objects as being a way of reflecting upon who we are, the robot, more than anything, questions what we are as human beings in today's world, and their point is to be anthropomorphised, and so including the lying, including the mocking, including all of those less celebrated traits of the human being, seems to produce the best results for us. This chap here is just lost, and he seems to be taking it in good spirit. All right, now we've had other. I'm going to hope this video works. We've had other robots that have given us a little bit of grief. So as part of the same exhibition in which Isaac was present, we were looking for robots to put on display, and we were looking at both industrial robots or practical robots, and we were also looking at the sort of popular cultural notion of robots, and in a way Isaac was a bit of an intertwining of the both. This is going terrifically here, as we can see. So what we did was we cast around for good examples of robots that fitted the Okay, so John Billingsley up in University of South East Queensland created this robotic cow, and it so fits the sort of definition of what a robot's good for. You know, repetition, tirelessly redoing the same tasks without getting, basically tirelessly. Ability to change behaviour at will and repeat behaviour at will. And this guy heard him on the radio, came into his office and said, I've got this problem that I'm training cutting horses and that I use calves to train them, but the calves work out too quickly that if they stand dead still, the training session is over and they can go back to the So I want you to build me a robotic cow, which is what he did. And you saw it in action there. It certainly worked from the perspective of the guy training the cutting horses. It could be programmed to do certain routines. Its routine could be changed by the guy on the horse who was training the horse. We said we definitely want one of those for our exhibition. And we tried to tell him that what we want is the robot that he produced, right? When we're interested in authenticity here. We want the actual thing, but he couldn't. I'll just get rid of this now and go back to my. John couldn't help himself. You saw that thing that was just a frame with sacks over the top, which worked fine. It worked very well. In fact, everyone who worked in that department told me the same story, that they left the robot cow in the stockyard one night, and it was then the subject of some amorous attention of a bull that was in the same yard. They enjoyed telling the story for its laughs, but it also to me seemed to constitute some sort of bovine Turing test for them, that they really had produced the real thing. And I said, I want the one that passed the test. But he had to go and build one because he didn't think it looked good enough for a museum, and so he created something that looked more cow-like. But as you can see, it's a tripod. It drives from the front wheel there, and he gave us one without and said it would run if we put a laptop in the back. It's got one battery. I don't know whether you saw, the other one had 2 batteries. This is a point worth noting, that this one had 1 battery because, in effect, what he did is he whipped one up as cheaply as possible to give us to the museum, but went to a lot of trouble to make it look cow-like. And initially it was on display in a showcase, but what we wanted to do was to operate it. So I did take the program and we did put a computer in, and we ended up having a public program where we were going to have the operating cow. I'll just, now, look at that face. Is there any hint there that it's going to misbehave? Possibly there is. I used to think it was sweet, but I don't know anymore. So this is what we did. We had to, once it got going, it was moving at considerable pace, and we had to put up this corral and bring people to the outside, and then we had it moving around in a routine. We gave it a sort of routine, and for the sake of the theatre, I would be talking about the cow and walk forward and get the kids to warn the kids at the front, can you keep an eye on it because it's a little bit unreliable, it's a bit, I suggested that it was badly behaved sometimes. And I had it programmed to race towards me while I was walking away, and the kids would scream and say, look out, and then it was supposed to turn off. The problem was, though, that with the 1 battery, they had 1 battery to drive the engines, and the same battery provided the power to the control circuitry, and as the motor used up the charge of the battery, the voltage on the control circuitry would eventually drop below the proper rails, and it would just go out of control. And it would only go out of control for about 10 seconds, because it didn't have enough power to drive the motor, but it had like a death spasm, where it would just go berserk and go everywhere. And so this is the most misbehaving animal that we had, and we went to a lot of trouble to avoid it because it was dangerous. We spent quite a bit of time doing this, but part of the crowd that gathered as word of this mad cow got out, and the staff used to come down particularly to see the mad cow demonstration. In more recent times, you might recognise this person. We over that period, what we did was, I think we went from seeing that unintended misinterpreted faults could be seen as malicious behaviour, and we recognised the value for that in terms of convincing people that we had an artificial intelligence. Right. And so we incorporated them deliberately into some of the things that we offered. But in more recent years, what we've been more involved in is I guess you'd call it human-computer interactive research, and we've had a number of examples. And when was it, 2010? 10. The articulated head won the Engineering Excellence Awards and in the research division, and we brought the articulated head into the museum and used the project basically used our visitors as to collect data to improve the interaction base of the articulated head. So Christian was working on the language program, and you were also working on the crowd detection program. And so we had an artwork. In fact, we'd done this before, but this was a spectacularly successful example of an artwork driving human-computer interaction research and creating what was a very engaging museum experience. In terms of the title, my talk about machines with attitude, there's a bit of attitude there. But one of the most interesting encounters was with when I saw a group of boys with a teacher typing their question to the articulated head, and they were sort of mucking up and not paying a lot of attention, and they wrote, "Are you an idiot?" to the head. The head responded, "Sometimes I'm known as the global village idiot," right? And the boys were sort of, but the teacher just about flipped his lid when he saw that response and had a quick look out the back to see if somebody was watching them to have come up with such a sort of clever answer. There was nobody there, so it was like a nod to the robot because he'd out-attituded his students. We actually kept this. This was supposed to be in for a year, but we kept it in for a second year because it was just such an attraction, and and I think a reasonable amount of research and value was gained from that interaction with our audience. I don't know. Don't know how many mistakes came of it. I don't know whether there were misbehaviours in there that were incorporated, but the questions of anthropomorphism, the questions of agency, were there for everybody to play with in this particular exhibit. Now, the most recent example of a museum that's delighted our audiences is when we had, during ISEA, which was here last year, and we had Wade Maranowski's Akonchi, is that how you pronounce it? Akonchi. Robot, which was a large box which detected when a person wasn't looking at them and then would follow them. So it was, you know, it was certainly sinister to people that this thing would pretend to be a box and then chase them when they turned away. And it was a remarkable. This was an art exhibition. This was the International Symposium on Electronic Arts, and we wonder here with our sort of more general audience whether people are going to engage with the artworks. But this just had screaming kids the whole time, screaming adults the whole time, and people enjoy the concept of this malicious intent, is what I would suggest. So, going back to the beginning, I said that we acquire things because they embody the values and beliefs of people who use them and produce them, that we're concerned with understanding what it means to be a human being, the engagement that we see with our robots, and particularly with the robots behaving the way they do, suggests to me that we are actually at our most human when we're being deceitful, sneaky, we're mocking other people. You know, the first robots were marvels basically because of their calculating ability, and that's what people came when they knew that the noughts and crosses machine was out calculating a human being. But I think we like our robots to be calculating at the other end of the spectrum. We like to think that we're dealing with them as we might do with another human being, and I think we're inclined to beware of malicious intent. So, thank you.